Begin, though, this morning with the latest developments in the Tyre Nichols investigation.
That's right. This morning, there's more fallout following the release of that graphic video and multiple videos last week showing Nichols' brutal beating. Yesterday, the Memphis Police Department announced that 2 more officers have been relieved of duty. We know the name of one of those officers, Preston Hemphill. Hemphill's lawyer released a statement yesterday saying he was, quote, never present at the second scene, and he is cooperating with officials in this investigation. And now the Memphis Fire Department says 3 of its employees who responded to Nichols' beating have been fired following an internal investigation. Meanwhile, last night, supporters gathered for prayer in a vigil at the intersection of where Tyree was brutally beaten following a traffic stop. His stepfather spoke about the pain the family is going through.
To know that my son died right here was heartbreaking. To know that my son was calling out my wife's name, and we was not able to hear him, to help him. It's devastating.
NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joins us now from Memphis with the latest in the investigation. Good morning, Ellison. So we have to note that the 2 latest officers who were relieved of duty were not fired or charged. What do we know about Preston, and why are we just now hearing the police department say he was involved?
Right now, of these 2, we only know the name of one of them, Officer Preston Hemphill. The 7th officer relieved of duty has not yet been named, at least publicly, though that is something that Tyre Nichols' family's attorneys, as well as community activists, are calling for. In terms of this officer, the 6th officer, Preston Hemphill, we know that he was hired by Memphis Police Department in 2018. The first body camera footage that was released on Friday night, what was identified, titled as Video 1, that moment when you see the officers first going up to Tyre Nichols' car and pulling him out, that video was from Preston Hemphill's body camera footage. We know that because that's what the Memphis Police Department has said, as well as his attorney. In terms of why we're just now getting this name, when NBC News spoke to a spokesperson for the Memphis Police Department yesterday, they said that they did not publicly release his name when they released the names of the other 5 officers because he had not been fired. They said that they only released the names of those 5 who had been fired and also subsequently charged. But in the case of the 6th officer, Preston Hemphill, and now also it appears the 7th officer, they weren't fired, rather they were relieved of duty. When asked specifically by NBC News if Officer Hemphill was on paid or unpaid leave, the spokesperson did not specify. But then in subsequent statements, they have acknowledged that he was present at the first scene, also that he deployed a taser. They are saying this, that investigators with the Memphis Police Department's internal affairs prioritized interviewing officers and witnesses related to the second scene first, where the most egregious aspects of the incident occurred. They say that, again, that he was not at that second scene. So that's why they're saying they've been, I guess, in some people's views, a little slower with releasing this information, with conducting this investigation. That being said, they are saying that there could be additional charges, that we should expect to see more personnel moves in the coming days. But for a lot of people, Zincle, there's great frustration that this person was not identified sooner. And I have to note that a big reason why his name really started to come up in the last 36 hours was because of local community activists, Black women who were on Twitter saying, hey, there's this name of an officer in one of the initial affidavits that's mentioned, and they say he used the taser at the scene. Why don't we know anything about this guy? Then from that, you had that group pressuring those activists, as well as some other local progressive outlets like the Tennessee Holler, that then led to the Memphis Police Department publicly identifying this individual. Tyre Nichols, his family, their attorneys, they are calling for this officer to be immediately fired and saying that they want to see more transparency from the Memphis Police Department, and they want all audio recordings to be released immediately. Zincle.
I mean, really important details there, Ellison, especially also about the community bringing that information forward. Ellison, I know we also know the Memphis Fire Department fired 3 employees after an investigation into their actions that night. What were the findings of that investigation?
Yeah, so they say these employees, 2 of them EMTs, one of them the driver of the fire department vehicle that arrived on scene initially, that they showed up and they responded based on what the initial call was for, which was that a individual had been pepper sprayed. They say they relied on that initial information and details and descriptions from officers at the scene rather than doing their own patient assessment on the ground. They say that essentially they failed to follow the basic protocols of their department. It took quite a while for an ambulance to actually arrive on scene, and there have been questions about that. It was over 20 minutes afterwards. These three called for an ambulance, but again, they were basing all of their moves, according to the fire department, on just the initial description that this individual was pepper sprayed, when clearly what we've seen in the videos, what we know happened after, he had much more severe injuries that needed attention, and he needed help much quicker than he got it. Zinclay.
Really important details in a case that has everyone's attention. Allison Barber, thank you so much.
A conversation about the death of Tyre Nichols reached Capitol Hill last night. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin, just one of many politicians who urged his colleagues to move on police reform, saying in part, quote, "It's time for members of the Senate to bridge our differences and pass a policing reform so that Tyre Nichols' death will not have been in vain." Ali Vitale joins us now from Washington, D.C. on this. Ali, good morning. So last night was, of course, not the first time that police reform has been discussed on the Senate floor. We've actually seen Senators Tim Scott and Cory Booker spearhead some bipartisan efforts around it in the past. First, I want to play a little bit of what Tim Scott had to say last night.
I take the issue of policing in America seriously. I want our body to see it not as an issue of Republicans versus Democrats, but as good people standing in the gap, elected to do a job.
Ali, give us some context here around what this typically looks like when it comes to a bipartisan effort here. What does it look like when we're trying to make police reform a bipartisan issue?
Well, Savannah, we know what it looked like because we watched these talks come together and then fall apart in the fall of 2021, not that long ago. And they were between Senator Tim Scott on the Republican side, who you saw on your screen just there, and Senator Cory Booker leading on the Democratic side. One of the main senators, Senator Dick Durbin, yesterday urged these lawmakers to get back to the negotiating table and see if they could find common ground, or, as Democrats in the White House want, if there's a way that they could push forward on the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which had previously passed the Democratic-controlled House, but stalled out in the Senate because of those ongoing negotiations. The optimism for this actually coming to fruition, though, Savannah, is pretty low, especially because even if these two sides on the Senate did come back to the negotiating table, the House realities have changed a lot. Republicans now control that chamber, and there is not a clamoring for action there.
Ali, I want to ask you about a couple other pieces of news here. First, we're seeing push from both sides of the aisle to call for a briefing on the various classified documents cases that have popped up recently. Do we think that's something that could actually happen soon?
Well, look, they're trying for it, and it's not just Republicans on the Senate side. It is Republicans and Democrats alike. We've seen the Senate Intel Committee marching in lockstep. Last week, they had a briefing with the Director of National Intelligence. No one was happy coming out of that briefing. They felt that they were being stonewalled. In Senator Rubio's words, he said that the DOJ was giving them the Heisman because the Director of National Intelligence said that while the DOJ special counsel investigations are going on, they're going to be pretty hamstrung in terms of what they can share. That is not a palatable answer to either party on the Senate side on this. So we're seeing them continue to push forward, trying to talk to the DOJ, trying to say that this is their job as the Intel Committee, is to get a sense of just what's in these documents, not just in the Trump case, though they have been asking that long, but also in the cases of President Biden and former Vice President Mike Pence.
Ali, quickly, also before I let you go, debt ceiling, another hot issue. The president is expected to meet with Speaker McCarthy tomorrow. Yeah, debt ceiling, hot issue. Never thought I'd say that. Do you think we'll get any concrete results from this meeting, Ali?
Well, look, it's a start. And yeah, this might be the thing that makes every American think that the debt ceiling is as important as it is. I don't know that we'll ever make the debt ceiling sexy, but this is something that could have truly catastrophic results on the American economy if the U.S. were to default on its debt. It's never happened before, and that's why we're seeing these negotiations start so early. This is probably not going to become a true pinch point until June. That's the date that the Treasury Department has put on the map for its so-called X date, when they would basically stop being able to pay their bills. We're watching Congress come together and try to start these negotiations at an early point. But here's the thing, Savannah, Democrats in the White House say this shouldn't be a negotiation at all. And then on the Republican side of this, you're going to see Speaker McCarthy leading the negotiating dynamics because it's his House, his conference, that's going to be harder to wrangle on a deal than on the Senate side of this. And Mitch McConnell has basically said as much, too, in recent days.
Allie, we're going to have to see if they'll raise the roof. You know what I'm saying? This is what happens when I get off my sleep schedule and I'm all over the place anchoring. Allie Vitale, thank you so much. Mwah, see you soon.
I love it.
Now, millions of Americans are bracing for a dangerous storm that's set to bring a triple weather threat of ice, snow, and sleet to states from Texas to West Virginia. So far, 48 million people are under winter weather alerts for this storm, with states like Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas already feeling the impact of it. According to the National Weather Service, these severe conditions could cause chaos on the roads. We have our meteorologist, Angie Lassman, keeping us up to date on the latest weather developments. But first, let's go to Maggie Vespa, who is live in the Windy City for us this morning. Maggie, good morning. So what is the situation looking like where you are? How are conditions in Chicago?
Savannah, simply put, it's physically painful to be outside here, and the proof here is in our thermometer. -2 degrees this morning. -2, just under the zero there. With the wind chill, it feels like -7, -8. So being out here is definitely treacherous, although we have, because Chicagoans are a different breed, seen people jogging in this weather. So go figure. But yeah, it's really bottoming out here in that below zero territory, and definitely, you know, dicey stuff for the roads and you know, the typical warnings that we tend to give out as the system makes its way across the country. Savannah.
And Maggie, it's Zinkley here. Treacherous sounds right when you're describing this weather. I know officials are also saying it may be the coldest temperatures since Christmas. National Weather Service saying highs are in the 16-degree range, which just sounds kind of painful. So how much colder is it expected to get? Will there be areas where people can go to get out of the cold?
So mercifully, guys, thankfully, this seems to be about where it's bottoming out here in Chicago. These overnight lows that are dipping just below zero. Again, the -2. I'll just hold this up for more street cred. The city of Chicago does have a well-oiled machine of getting people into warming shelters, particularly those who are experiencing homelessness and that kind of thing. And those warnings are out throughout the area. But, you know, for a lot of people who might be caught off guard by this, kids going to school, people going to work, officials are just asking them to check the forecast before they leave, because as you said, this is definitely treacherous and painful if you get stuck in it in some way, guys.
Oof, Maggie, I hate hearing you say it's painful to be out there. And we're like, please continue standing there while I continue to ask you questions. But last one, I promise, this cold front is expected to last until tomorrow. But then I know it's coming back over the weekend. How's the city going to deal with this extreme weather for this extended period of time?
Yeah, we do have a little bit of break in between. I know that we have our forecast coming up, and that, you know, here in the Midwest, it seems to be a little bit of a reprieve in the middle where temperatures are kind of going to get up into the 30s, even the 40s, and then back down into the teens. And, you know, again, they have the alerts out. They're asking people to take it slow, check the forecast, get inside into warming shelters if they need it. But, guys, I mean, just truth be told, this is Chicago. You know, people in Chicago, Minneapolis, these like hardened Midwest cities, they've been through this before. We've had a string of joggers. Can't go figure, coming behind our camera crew throughout the morning. So people are prepared and they're used to this, but it's still definitely worth heeding those warnings, guys.
I mean, you won't catch me jogging behind a camera crew even when it's sunny out. So
yeah, no kidding.
That's impressive.
Maggie, you haven't been there very long, but you seem like you're like a hardened, you're used to that city. You look totally chill out there. All right, Maggie, get inside. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Literally, chill. All right, well, it's not just Chicago. 36 million people are under winter alerts this morning. For more on that, let's get a check at your Morning News Now weather. Of course, it means Angie Lassman joins us. Hey, Angie.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, Maggie is exactly right. Millions of people are dealing with this bitter cold, and not to mention the wintry mix that's making it really rough out there on those roadways. So let's start with the winter alerts. 35 million people included in this. Where you see the bright purple, pay special attention to that, because those are ice storm warnings that have been in effect in places like Little Rock and Memphis. And here's why. You see the wintry mix working through, likely to see some ice accumulation throughout the next day or so here as we watch for multiple rounds of rain, snow, sleet to work through basically parts of the South over the next 48 hours. Here's how it plays out. This front continues to drag in colder air. We also see more moisture developing right along it. On the warmer part of it, you'll notice that it's rain, but a little
farther into the north where we see the colder air in place. It's a mix of freezing rain and, of course, that snow as well. So we'll have multiple impacts when it comes with this ice accumulation as well as the flooding concern. And you can see that flooding will likely last into places in the south as we get into Wednesday and even Thursday as that heavy rain works through. So let's talk about the ice accumulation. It looks like the higher amounts, about 1/4 of an inch, maybe even 1/2 of an inch, are focused towards places like Texas, especially Central Texas, Waco, Austin, all included in that where we can see some of those higher amounts. But again, we could see up to 1/2 an inch of ice accumulation on the roadways. This means damage for trees. It means power line issues. It means roadways are going to be really tough. And I want you to pay special attention to bridges, especially if you're in these areas that are going to deal with some freezing rain over the next couple of days. We know that the ground, of course, it keeps it from the ground keeps roads from cooling down as fast as the air temperature. But notice what happens with this air flowing underneath a bridge. It quickly speeds up that drop in temperature, and that means that we often see icing happening on bridges first. So that's why you see those signs leading up to the bridge. So just be careful on that. We saw multiple reports of that in parts of Texas yesterday, and we likely will see more of that here over the coming days. There's the rainfall amounts. Jackson, Mississippi, Shreveport, all included in those places where we could see the higher totals. And notice parts of Texas and into Louisiana. We do have a good chance that we could see some flooding concerns there. Again, Shreveport included in that, extending out towards Tyler. That's where we have a better chance of some flooding concerns through at least tomorrow and even into Thursday. Now, on to the cold. 19 million people impacted by these wind chill alerts. This is going to be something we'll deal with again through tomorrow. Those are the alerts that are up right now, and you can see why. -5 for what it feels like in Omaha right now. -10 for Bismarck. 34 below for the wind chill in Duluth. It is a day where either you stay inside or you have multiple layers. Even if you're in places like Little Rock and St. Louis, we're talking teens. As we get into the afternoon hours today, Shreveport ends up just 39 degrees, 23 in Oklahoma City. These numbers are well below normal for this time of year, so just be careful if you're going to be heading out and about, even into the south. Temperatures in Austin, even tomorrow, will not get out of the 30s. We will hit 37 degrees, again, well below normal for this time of year, so something to make note of. If you are in the Northeast and wondering where the cold air is, we've seen kind of a nice stretch to January as we wrap up this last day. We're going to continue to see a warm January go into the record books, but that doesn't last through the weekend. We'll see places like Boston, 26 degrees on Friday, ending up at 14 on Saturday. If you live in New York City, you'll wake up to single-digit temperatures in the morning hours of Saturday, so the Northeast is going to be included in this cold weather as well, ladies.
The Arctic surge always comes on a weekend.
Still no snow. What is going on? Also, I was really into your bridge animation. That was cool and really good to keep people safe. Give them some good info.
Now
Thanks,
you know.
Angie. Exactly.
Angie Lassman, thank you so much. And the double murder trial of Alex Murdoch kicked off its second week with the jury getting a look inside Murdoch's gun room from police body cam video. All as prosecutors brought his gun arsenal into the courtroom. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander has more.
Well, this is a trial that is bringing nationwide attention to the town of Walterboro, South Carolina. Day 6 of the trial saw 2 different agents take the stands and a back and forth over guns. In a South Carolina courtroom, a dramatic show and tell.
Let's see what else is in this box.
On the stand, investigator Jeff Croft revealing gun after gun found at the hunting property of Alec Murdoch, the disbarred attorney on trial for the murder of his wife and adult son.
And again, if you can show that to the jury, please.
But the murder weapons have not been recovered, and Murdoch's defense attorneys repeatedly objected to the guns being shown, saying ballistics tests had already determined these were not involved.
They're just not relevant. But sending, just weapon after weapon back into the jury room during jury deliberations, we think is unfairly prejudicial.
This agent gathered 12-gauge weapons for a reason, because 12-gauge rounds were used to murder Paul Murdoch.
Jurors watched body camera video showing investigators searching Murdoch's gun closet and recovering old shell casings from the property not involved in the murders. Jurors also heard recordings of an emotional Murdoch, questioned by law enforcement several days after the killings. When asked about his wife, he breaks down.
I have a wonderful wife.
During that recording, Murdoch also references a .300 blackout rifle, the same type of weapon investigators say was used in Maggie's death.
Do people often use .300 blackout to shoot hogs?
They do.
The day began with Murdoch's attorneys suggesting because there were 2 weapons used, there may have been 2 different shooters.
One explanation, not the, but one.
Not the only one.
Yeah, not the only one, but it is a reasonable explanation, just like one shooter running up that way, correct? Sure.
But the state pushed back on that, saying it could also mean there was one shooter using 2 different guns. Back to you.
Blaine Alexander, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.